What up, Wizards? It's Dev here with Igby. We're from Mtg. We like the magic. Both of us, the cat too. And today, we got some Saturday Crimson Vow spoilers, which means that we don't have as many as we normally do during a weekday, but there are some really cool cards to look at today. I don't want to waste too much time, so after you like and subscribe, we'll go ahead and get to it. Sorry I had to do the self-promotion thing. It's a YouTuber thing. I have to do it. I hate doing it. Let's look at some cards. But as usual, let's go ahead and ease into some things with some commons, as well as some uncommons, of course. Let's kick off our bathrobes. Let's dip our toes into the steamy hot springs before we completely submerge with cards like Innocent Traveler. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 black for a 1/3 human. At the beginning of your upkeep, any opponent may sacrifice a creature. If no one does, transform Innocent Traveler into Malicious Invader. This is a 3/3 vampire with flying that gets +2/+0 as long as an opponent controls a human. I'm talking myself into this card in limited, not in standard. I don't think it does anything in standard. I'm pretty sure this card is mostly just like all flavor. And I love that they finally did something with like the vampire mechanic of having to be led into the house. I think they kind of nailed the flavor there, but I feel like it's priced out of playability in most formats and even in limited. I have the compulsion to look at this as like removal on one half, and then if it's not removal at any point in the game, then it's a 3/3 flyer, which is always like a decent stat line in limited. So like this is probably better than I think, and it could even be a 5/3 flyer. And in most games of limited, it very likely will be because there's a bunch of humans. So like a 4 mana 5/3 flyer that takes a little bit of work to transform and might pick up a creature or two in the meantime. Like maybe that's a lot better than I think it is, and this is actually a crazy force of a card in limited. But all things considered, I like the flavor way more than the function. Now let's look at Dormant Grove next. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for an enchantment. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. Then, if that creature has toughness 6 or greater, transform Dormant Grove into Gnarled Grove Strider, double G's. It's a 3/6 tree folk with vigilance and gives all your other dudes vigilance. For that matter, this is kind of cool. I mean, it is 4 mana for your Luminarch Aspirant that can't also attack or block. So, I don't know. I mean, in a way, this is better as an enchantment because it's not as removable as a card like Luminarch Aspirant, but it costs twice as much. I mean, actually, I think the better comparison than Luminarch Aspirant is Ranger class, but this doesn't give you a body, and that kind of makes all the difference. You also have to pay up front rather than in installments for this ability, and then you only get it for a few turns, depending on how you distribute counters. I mean, I guess you could distribute counters in such a way that this just perpetually works. But at some point, if one of your dudes gets 6 toughness, this flips, and in a way, that could suck. Maybe I want a Luminarch Aspirant every turn more than I want a 3/6 Vig, but I don't know. Vigilance is a better ability than we ever give it credit for, and having a 3/6 body is pretty good too, especially if for your 4 mana investment, you got a 3/6 body and like 3 or 4 +1/+1 counters on different guys. It's not bad, but... And you can't even call this a do-nothing enchantment. Like, it does do something the turn it enters the battlefield, but I guess we just have a million better options in standard, even if this does flip, like, immediately, because it can flip immediately. Put a +1/+1 counter on a 5 toughness dude, or even a 6 toughness guy, a guy that's already 6 toughness, and raises toughness, to 6 or beyond. And suddenly you flip this the turn it comes into play, which is also not bad. Like a 4 mana 3/6 vigilance that gives all your other dude vigilance. That's really not terrible, but I don't know why I'm judging these transform for 4 mana cards like so harshly today. Because I think there's a lot of cool things about these, especially in the limited format, but I don't know why I'm talking about them as long as I am, because there's just no hope for these cards in standard at all. But up next is Kindly Ancestor. She knows how to spread love and be kind. This is 3 mana, 2 and a white for a 2/3 spirit with lifelink, and disturb 1 and a white. Now, if you disturb it, you get Ancestor's Embrace. This is an aura that gives the creature it's on lifelink. And I think that's great. Like, again, I don't know about standard playability or anything like that, but in limited, I'm telling you, enchantments like auras and stuff that give creatures a lifelink are super annoying. They are really difficult to play against, and they make you feel like you're pulling way ahead in the damage race when you have a creature with lifelink or an aura that grants lifelink. It's a severely underrated limited ability when so many limited games come down to races or, just ways to trade back and forth in combat. Lifelink can be a very, very good ability in these swingy games. So, early in the game, you got a 2/3 lifelink, you block with it, it gains you some life, maybe it trades, and then later in the game, once you have your 4/4, your 5/5, or, your 4/4 flyer or something like that, you throw this on it from your graveyard, and you win the game, like, pretty easily. You pull ahead, like, by leaps and bounds. I like lifelink enchantments, and I especially like the low disturb cost on this thing. So later on in the game, when your opponent's either out of removal or low on cards in their hand or whatever, and you've got a pretty decent threat, but you're not, way ahead, this will help you get way ahead or catch up from behind. In games where your opponent has been able to get some damage on you, but you've caught up on board with some removal here and there, and now you've landed a bigger dude, this, again, will help you catch way up. So I like the way this performs in various, gameplay scenarios in Limited. I've always been a big fan, and maybe I overvalue these, but I feel like everyone else undervalues lifelink auras in Limited because people are kind of off auras in Limited. People don't love auras, which makes sense because you might get 2 for 1. But again, like I've said before, this new disturb ability, the way they're doing it in this set, makes it to where you don't feel as blown out if you miss on your enchantment or if your creature gets removed or whatever, because at least you got a creature up front. I don't know. I like these a lot, and I've always been a big fan of lifelink Rs in Limited, so I think there might be something to this. Pay attention. But next, let's check out Rending Flame. This is 3 mana, 2 and a red for an instant, deals 5 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that permanent is a spirit, Rending Flame also deals 2 damage to that permanent's controller. I kind of like this a good bit. I mean, we've actually seen stuff like, God, I have standard brain, so I can't remember. It's like Searing Blaze or Searing Flame or Searing something or other. It was a 3 mana instant that dealt 5 damage. That actually saw like a fair amount of sideboard play in red decks in the last format, mostly to take out Lovestruck Beasts, other 5 toughness threats. And this could fulfill a similar role. Right now we're seeing Heated Debate as the sort of 3 mana red sideboard spell of choice because it gets through the Goldspan Dragon attack, get a treasure token, cast Negate. It goes through that line because it can't be countered and it kills the Goldspan. So Heated Debate, again, is the 3 mana sideboard red spell right now that deals damage. But if there's a decent 5 toughness threat that sort of emerges in this format, then I could definitely see this taking its place. And especially if Spirits is a real deck, I would imagine this is a decent sideboard card, obviously. Now, there are a couple more uncommons today, but these are really good uncommons, like the reprint Valorous Stance, baby, it's back. I love this card so much. This is 1 and a white for an instant. You choose 1, target creature gains indestructible until end of turn, or you destroy target creature with toughness 4 or greater. I have missed you. I have missed you so much, and I'm also probably going to hate you. Valorous Stance is such a good Magic card, you guys. It's funny, actually. It feels like coming full circle, man. When I first started doing Magic content creation, I believe it was for Fate Reforged was our first set review that we did, and I believe this card was in Fate Reforged. So it was like the first spoiler season videos that I ever did included this card, and it is just as good, I believe, as it was back then. I mean, this gives even better, perhaps. It used to kill Siege Rhinos and stuff, but nowadays this is going to kill Goldspan Dragons in your mono white deck while also protecting you from Dragon's Fires and all those different removal spells that the Izzet Dragons decks play. So this is just super sexy for the mono white decks and a bunch of other decks. I mean, mid-range decks love this card so much. So I don't know if this is a good signal for mid-range or anything, but just imagine having, it's like a Snakeskin Veil in a way, but also on a removal spell. And that's just, it's so unbelievably good. This is one of the better modal spells, or at least one of my favorite modal spells, literally of the last 10 years. So I'm super happy to have this card back, and it might honestly, seriously for real, be the strongest card of the day. Don't underestimate how good Valorous Stance is if you've never gotten to play with it. It's always got something to do. Such a freaking good card. So good. If you're playing against the Blue-Red Dragons deck, you can save it for their Goldspan or something like that. But if you're playing against another kind of control deck that doesn't have a whole lot of creatures, then it's just basically a counter spell against removal or a form of wrath protection that saves your best creature. Just, my God, I could go on about Valorous Stance all day. I've missed it so much. What a good card. What a freaking good card this is. But I will move on to a new uncommon that I think is really sweet, and that's Biolume Egg. Biolume Egg is 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 0/4 Serpent Egg with Defender, and when it ETBs, you scry 2. And when you sacrifice Biolume Egg, return it to the battlefield transformed under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And you get Biolume Serpent. This is a 4/4 Serpent. And you sack 2 islands, and it can't be blocked this turn. This is a sweet little card, man. I'm not sure how great it actually is in Standard. I do think it's a little bit overpriced, and you have to support it with a sacrifice card. But how hard is that? Deadly Disputes in this format, Village Rites, and a couple of other things. There's plenty of creatures to to sacrifice this to and other effects that you could sacrifice to, that would be totally fine, right? Like you could just play a Demon's Disciple or something like that. Like this is the thing you sack. Your opponent sacks a creature. You get a 4/4. Like I feel like there's plenty of ways to blow people out with this. Like, oh, you pass turn? Cool. Deadly Dispute my egg. Get a treasure token. Get a 4/4. Eat your face. Like, I don't know, man. It seems pretty good to me. But 3 mana is an awful lot. And I imagine a lot of times you're going to have to cast this while you still have enough mana to cast the Deadly Dispute or cast the Village Rites. So it costs like 4 or 5 mana unless you have some sort of free sack outlet on the table, right? So in those cases, it's really going to kind of cost like 5 mana for your 3/3 flyer or your 4/4 flyer, and that's not as good. Right? But I guess it's an interesting like finisher in a way, because if you have the islands to sack, you can get through unblocked, and a couple of turns of that and the opponent's dead. So I don't know. This is a kind of an awesome card in terms of design at the very least, but it's hard to say whether or not it's actually good. But I don't know. I think just the Deadly Dispute play is sexy enough to make this like a card that I want to test with, but I want to know if it's truly, truly good, and I can't tell you whether or not it is right now. But I have my foibles about the card, mostly in terms of cost, but in terms of functionality, I think this thing has a chance. But up next, let's look at Engulfing Tide, dog. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 blue for a sorcery. Each player chooses a non-land permanent they control. Return all other non-land permanents to their owner's hand. Then draw a card for each opponent with more cards in hand than you. That's kind of really neat against mono white, for instance, or even like mono green or something like. Like any deck that's gonna have like 4 creatures in play when you play this. Pretty sexy. Sign me up for that, dude. Like I was saying in a recent video, check it out, by the way. It's just cards that I think get better with Crimson Vow, and a lot of those cards hinged on whether or not we got the new dual lands, and we did. so that video holds up a little bit more than I thought it might, so I'm happy about that. But in any case, I was saying in that video that if mono blue gets a halfway decent sweeper, then like mono blue control or mono blue Demi-Lich is on the table, son. And this is especially cool with Demi-Lich because you can keep your Demi-Lich on the table, you know, and bounce everything else or whatever. And in that deck, your Demi-Lich or your Delver is going to be the only creature that you have out. So I don't know, guys. I think this is like really slick, and I know that it leaves a thing on the battlefield, and so it's pretty tempting to say like, oh, this is trash, and it might be. You don't want a sweeper that leaves their best thing on the battlefield, right? But I think in just the right deck that's built for it, this could be really, really sweet, and please remember that it draws cards. I'm a huge, huge fan of this thing, and I'm glad we got it. I felt like we needed it. But let's check out Investigator's Journal next. This is 2 mana for an artifact that just happens to be a clue. I think that's cool. Investigator's Journal enters the battlefield with a number of suspect counters on it equal to the greatest number of creatures a player controls. You can pay 2 and tap it and remove a suspect counter to draw a card, and you can just pay 2 and sacrifice it to draw a card. I think it's cool that you don't have to tap it to sacrifice it to draw the card. So there's going to be some turns where, like, end of your opponent's turn, you pay 2 and tap it to draw the card and remove the last counter from it. And then, if you have more mana, you just pay 2 more mana to draw another card. And that's really sweet. Like, this isn't Maze Mind Tome, but I think it's going to fulfill a similar role in some decks. You know, your mono black decks, your mono white decks, and other mono blue even sometimes. I mean, there's going to be control decks, and I know that blue can draw cards, but there's control decks that always want a card like Maze Mind Tome. And I think mono black is a good example, actually. I also like cards like this that are better on the draw. And it's not always going to be better on the draw, but in a lot of cases, you know, against mono white or mono green, you know, especially mono white, they go 1-drop, 2-drop. And then on your turn 2, you just drop this and you have 2 counters on it. And again, it's not Maze Mind Tome. And one of the better functions of Maze Mind Tome in the aggro matchups is that it gains you that life, that 4 life when it eventually goes out. This won't do that, and that kind of sucks nuts. But like, I will say, it even like a slightly worse version of Tome is still probably good enough for very specific decks in Standard. Again, mono black I think is a good example of a deck that might want a card like this. If you can play it and get, you know, 2 counters on it, I think it might be worth it most of the time. If you play it late in the game and you get like 6 counters on it and you can follow it up with like a sweeper of some kind, then that seems very, very good. If you can lock the game up by casting this, your opponent has 4 creatures, 5 creatures, something like that. You cast this on the same turn that you cast like a Shadow's Verdict or something, if you have the mana for that late enough in the game. Now, you may have lost the game by then if your opponent has that many creatures, but, you know, I'm still... I will say that if you can make it to a point in the game where you can land sweeper plus this in the same turn, or like this into key removal spell on the same turn, then there's a world where you keep living enough turns to actually use all the counters, draw the cards, and do that. So I think this is a really, really sweet card that will see some sparing play here and there. It'll have a role in Standard. Well, let's check out Cemetery Protector here. This is 4 mana, 2 and 2 white for a 3/4 human soldier with flash. And when it enters the battlefield, you exile a card from a graveyard. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, if it shares a card type with the exiled card, create a 1/1 white human creature token. Like, that's kind of cool. It's really sweet that it has flash. So like you flash it in your opponent's combat step, get a block in, or flash it in EOT or something. And exile a land from a yard or something, right? And then next turn when you hit your land drop, you get a 1/1. Like, it's not terrible. Like, it's basically landfall, get a 1/1 in a lot of situations. But if you exile a creature and then cast a creature on the next turn, you get a free 1/1. So I don't know. I kind of like this. I like the flash nature of it. I especially like that. Let's say you flash this in. All right. Let's say it's your opponent's combat step. Let's go there. We have 5 mana. It's our opponent's combat step. We flash this in and we exile an instant from a graveyard. Okay. And then we Fading Hope one of our opponent's creatures with our remaining mana. Well, now we have a 3/4, a 1/1, all an ambush that our opponent, we didn't have that out at the beginning of our opponent's turn, and we were able to remove a creature with Fading Hope. So we can just completely, there's combat interactions where if you remove an instant or something from a graveyard, you can just you can start blowing people out immediately. It's pretty sexy. Or like, let's take another line in a control deck, right? End of turn, we play this, and we exile an instant, okay? So we untap with this, with all of our mana open, and now if our opponent tries to kill it and we counter the spell that would kill it, we get a 1/1. Like, that's putting us massively up in terms of board presence and tempo. So I think there's a lot of extremely sweet things about this card and the lines you can take, whether you're playing creatures, lands, or especially instants, which is what I think you want to be doing with this. That's entirely possible that's the actual best card of the day, but my favorite card of the day by a lot is Gerolf. This is the G-Man's back, everybody. He's a visionary stitcher. He's 3 mana, 2 and a blue for a 1/4 legendary human wizard. Zombies you control have flying. We knew that line of text was coming on a card. I just thought the card would be kind of bad. I was thinking, they wouldn't show this line of text if the card wasn't terrible. But no, the card's actually pretty good. You can also pay a blue and tap G to sacrifice another non-token creature and create an XX blue zombie creature token, where X is the sacrificed creature's toughness. This is just sweet on so many levels. Like, it's bolt proof with the 4 toughness. That matters even in Standard against cards like Frostbite or a Dry Dragon's Fire. It's just very, very sweet. Zombies you control have flying on a 3 mana 1/4 is actually not terrible. There's a ton of decayed zombies in the format. This goes pretty well with a card like Jadar on turn 2. And beyond, for that matter. Goes pretty well with Ghoulish Procession or Champion of the Perished or Tainted Adversary, especially Tainted Adversary. There's also like a combo deck where oh my god, I just played with this card. I just played a 4 of this card in the Stick Fingers combo deck, and now I can't remember the name of it. It's this Harvest is in the name? Ghoul Caller's Harvest. Bam! Nailed it. I got to it. But it's really slick with Ghoul Caller's Harvest because, you hit like a Ghoul Caller's Harvest for 6 or something, and they all have flying, and that's just physically attractive. that's pretty good, man. Like, Zombies You Control Have Flying is a very good line of text in a format with a bunch of decayed zombies, a bunch of ways to make more. Giving Champion of the Parish flying is pretty hot in and of itself. So it's good. This is a fine card. Just in the stats to mana cost ratio, that first line of text, but you can really do some silly stuff with the activated ability. It's only 1 blue, and Geralf has to be on your side of the table for a whole turn before you can use this, and that's usually not great. I will say this technically does something the turn it enters the battlefield. It gives all your zombies flying, and that could be massively good if you top deck this and you have like 7 zombies in play. You just win the game right then and there. So it does have some relevance the turn you play it. But if you can untap with this on the table still, then juice, like just straight juice. Like, anytime your opponent points a removal spell on a non-token dude, you can just make that guy a token. Like, oh, whoops, I got a token. And if it gets even better because like your opponent tries to say target one of your zombies with a removal spell and you sacrifice it in response, because this isn't a sorcery speed thing. You just sack it in response, make a zombie, and then like your Champion of the Parish gets bigger. at instant speed, which is pretty cute. I imagine there's going to be times where your opponent really doesn't see the play, and like they come in on attacks. So when you sacrifice like a 3-4 or something like that, then you get a 4-4 to block with, and your champion gets a little bit bigger. And these are maths your opponent may not have known to do. Or if they did know to do them, maybe that deters them from attacking, and that's a good thing too. So I don't know. I like a lot about this card. If you untap with this on the table, then your zombies are, your creatures, your non-tokens at least, are slightly removal proof in some way. Like, at least they replace themselves for value and proc all of your a zombie came into play effects. So it's instant speed. Again, I think it's going to play into it like way more than you might think. Just a hot little toddy of a card here. I like it's Rooster Sauce. This is a good looking Magic card to me. But that is it for this one. Now, we're not done for the weekend though. Tomorrow, Halloween night. I know I don't have like kids or anything, and I really didn't feel like actually doing a Halloween thing this year at all, like going out of my house and doing a Halloween thing. So instead, I'm just going to stream. Why not? I'm going to stream for a couple hours on Halloween night tomorrow. And just talk about, like, you know, my favorite cards from the set so far, and maybe some interactions that I'm now excited about that I haven't gotten a chance to talk about yet. And my chat will be there to talk about all the things they're excited about and tell me some combos I haven't seen and stuff. It's going to be a fun time. So join us on the Twitch streams tomorrow night. That is Sunday night, Halloween. For a nice little stream time. Go on and follow so you get the notification when I start streaming. But aside from that, you can check us out on Patreon. $1 a month is all it takes to vote on what decks we do all during Crimson Vow season. And, you know, more. There's more things that happen on Patreon. It's a fun we have a fun time over there, too. So check me out. $1 a month is all it takes to support the channel. But aside from that, just let me know how you felt about these. You know, again, anything I missed, like, let me know down there. And how do you feel about some of these cards? You know, like, what is it, Cemetery Keeper, Cemetery Protector, or whatever, the Flash 3-4. I think in a lot of ways it's going to be better than Glorious Protector if we're comparing Flash 3-4s. I like that card. And I like Geralf, too. Geralf looks very, very sweet. But, you know, anything that maybe I poo-pooed on or I shouldn't have, or anything that I'm too excited for, just hit me up down there in the comment section. We'll have a conversation. But aside from that, I guess I'm done for this. So I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.